is Hard Pass, an analysis of press coverage of the top political story of the day. White House correspondent Brian Karam and university journalism professors Dr. Michael Meyer and Dr. Mark Meaderson host Hard Pass. In this episode, has the Keystone dropped? The team will be looking at the administration's move to control law enforcement in the District of Columbia. Here's that announcement.
I've been up here a lot. I've never seen a crowd like this. I think we need a ballroom, and that's happening. It's going to be a beautiful ballroom. This is really a lot of people, most I've ever seen in this room. And we're here for a very serious purpose, Something's out of control, but we're going to put it in control very quickly like we did on the southern border. I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening, and they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
I'm Mark Meaderson, journalism PhD and assistant professor of electronic media at Texas State University. Welcome to Hard Pass. With me, as always, Dr. Michael Meyer, journalism PhD and assistant professor of communications at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Dr. Meyer, hello again.
Greetings from Milwaukee, which is not quite as underwater as it was 2 days ago, but I was out of town and had the distinct pleasure of watching AI videos that apparently we have an L train, and we have these big hills that look more like San Francisco where I was than Milwaukee. So interesting.
That's wild. That's wild, wacky stuff.
Wacky stuff.
Also, White House correspondent Brian Karam. Brian, I'm going to actually start with you during the introduction. The president's announcement in the Brady briefing room has sent shockwaves through the country. As you heard at the beginning of that clip we just showed, the briefing room was packed. Before we get into it, Brian, were you allowed into the press conference?
No, I wasn't there, and that wasn't the most packed I've ever seen the briefing room. It's not even as packed as it was during his first administration. It wasn't as packed as it's been many times, and here's the one that Donald doesn't want to hear. It wasn't as the most packed I've ever seen the Brady briefing room was the last press briefing by Barack Obama, January, I think it was 18th, 2017, and there were more than 250 people in that room. Wasn't even close to that today. There was maybe 80. So Donnie lied again. But of course, he lied about everything he did today, so we could go from there. And the press didn't cover it very well. There's my preach. I'm done.
Yeah. They actually stepped away from this announcement pretty quickly and went to Russia and his meeting with Vladimir Putin. I'm going to stick with you, Brian. The president says that crime in the District of Columbia has gotten so out of control that he had to invoke the Home Rule Act, which allows the federal government to take control of D.C. The president cited a couple of individual violent crimes that recently took place in the capital. But, Brian, the crime statistics from the FBI and the Metropolitan Police show just the opposite. Overall, violent crime is down by 26%, and homicide is down by 12%. The facts simply don't jibe with the president's claims. So, in your opinion, why this drastic action in D.C., and why now?
2 words: Jeff Epstein. Donald Trump doesn't want to talk about Jeff Epstein. This is part of the Roy Cohen, strategy. When you never claim that you lost, deflect, defend, never let them talk about what they want to talk about and always claim victory. This is part and parcel of what the hell Donald Trump's always done. And the fact of the matter is, he also called into question the facts. You are absolutely right. Those statistics that you just quoted are released. Those are uniform crime statistics released by, guess who? Our government. So that's Donald Trump was lying. So here's the thing that we didn't do in that press briefing that really hacked me off. There were 3 questions I want to answer. First, Jeff Epstein. Secondly, what are you going to do with the homeless? You say you're going to close homeless encampments and you're going to kick them out of the district. What the hell are you going to do with them? They're people. What are you talking about? And as far as the teens, and this is just demonizing the least of us, teens and homeless people. And then the third question I want to ask him is, where the hell did he get his facts? Because they're not, he called all the facts in the question. He said, they're all wrong. And all right, so where did you get yours? This is the same crap he pulled with us. And I asked him on the Southwell, and it used to be in a wonderful rose garden. Now today it looks like a cheap patio at Mar-a-Lago. But asking him about where does he get his facts? And the other thing that should have been asked, and the press did not push back against any of this. Here's a quote from Dear Donnie. They fight back until you knock the hell out of them. That's the only thing they understand. They love to spit in the face of the police, and they're screaming at them and spitting at them. You spit and we hit real hard. Police now can, quote, do whatever in the hell they want, unquote. 2 other quotes, time for dramatic action. We will bring in the military if needed. What do you need him for? You didn't need him in L.A. You didn't, and we never call him on his lies anymore. The sycophants are in the room, and so we got questions from people who again wanted to ask him why he's so brilliant. How is it that he's so gorgeous? He can spout rainbows out of his butt, and everybody loves him. It's crap, and we did a poor job today. And those in the press room should be appalled at themselves and apologize to the American people.
Mike, what do you think?
I mean, I'll say that that's been sort of the meta commentary on the press's performance I've seen as well. That I did get home at 3 a.m. last night Central, so I was not up for the press conference today. But just sort of watching the response, the questions about the invocation here sounds like they really didn't get at the underlying rationale and sort of what this generally means, right? And to be fair, right, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, I think, when we talked about Epstein, right? And what does it take to get Epstein off the top of the news agenda, and does it involve bloodshed? And I think the concern, right, is that this is what we're building toward, is some sort of engineered confrontation in D.C. between a federal agent far from home, or maybe not far from home, frankly, and somebody who they encounter in the street.
That's what he's hoping for. And that's, you're right, man. You are so right. All he wants to do is if he can dissuade you to not talk about Epstein for a few days, it ain't going anywhere. Then this will die, because we're not asking about it. This issue will die, and nobody will say anything about it. But as soon as there's a confrontation, and damn well he's praying that happens, he's going to come back and go, "See, I told you so."
Right, and they scheduled a lot for this week, right? I think we'll see this, right? There's this, and then they're going to Alaska to meet with Putin. So there's a lot on the news agenda this week. So when we talk about the battle over the news agenda, right, the ability to drive stories, that it always is a home game for the White House, right? They are able to put things on the agenda, and that's what we've seen this week. And that's what we would. If we were teaching a PR crisis class, that's what we would encourage them to do, right? If they're not going to answer the questions, give the media something else to talk about. And this is a situation where, in some ways that's what's happening.
Well, and they focused on, they brought up, the president brought it up, I believe Bondi brought it up, or Patel, some individual rather gruesome crimes that occurred, and used those as the reasoning behind this. And we go ahead.
Incident. Yeah, they use isolated incidents to prove a point that doesn't exist. They create the fire, and then they want to put out the fire. And let's be honest, if you're really worried about crime, why are you talking about Washington, D.C., we have on average in this country, what is it, a mass shooting every other day? And we don't get anything out of him about that. Have one Doge member get his nose, get socked in the nose, and he was bleeding, dripping blood, he could have died. Yeah, that you decide to close down D.C. and turn it into an armed encampment. And by the way, if you're going to do that, why wasn't it? How can you possibly scream and rant and rave about what was done January 6th? Because that's the last damn day that we actually had unlimited violence in Washington, D.C. He should be taking credit for it being so damn peaceful instead of being a crime haven. And by God, he called those people on January 6th patriots. And these were people who killed a police officer. These are people who brought pipe bombs. These are people that beat up reporters. These are people who smeared feces on the wall. These were violent criminals. He's talking about violent criminals. They're terrible. They're horrible people. Some of them homegrown. We should be able to put them away forever. But he'll pardon the people who created violence for him.
So there's obviously a lot going on with this story. The episode is called "Has the Keystone Dropped?" The keystone, for those who don't know, is the center stone that holds up a stone archway. If it drops, the whole archway falls. The president said this may not stop with just D.C. Mike, even though you didn't get to see the press conference, one of the things he said was there are several other large cities, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and Baltimore, where this federal control may move next.
Well, he actually said what he's encouraging them to follow their lead. He was very obscure and about whether or not federal government would be involved. But you're right. He did point out L.A., which is another bunch of BS, because L.A. was, he said that if they hadn't put the military and the National Guard in L.A., that L.A. would have burned to the ground.
Yeah, it'd still be burning.
It's such a load of crap as to be laughable. Sorry, I didn't mean.
No. Well, what he said was basically this would be a version of self-deportation. He said if these cities would decide to crack down now, that he may not have to bring in the federal government, that if they would, and he was trying to come up with a phrase for self-regulating here, and it was just more of this sort of self-deportation. Again, this feels like a step towards a strict federal authority. Dr. Meyer, in our last episode, we used the dystopian novel 1984 as analogous to what was happening. You said that comparison is normally hyperbolic, but maybe not in this case. Is it hyperbolic to say that this move, this keystone of local control being pulled, is analogous to authoritarianism?
I can't say no, right? Because he's very clearly taken control from the local government. I think the language some of they're using, in some of the write-ups I've seen, the language they're using is liberating cities from the control of their elected officials, which is a very strange phrase if you try to unpack it, right? Will the FBI be greeted as liberators? Maybe we should ask, right? Will the National Guard be greeted as liberators in Washington, D.C.? I have my doubts. I'll just say this as somebody who's, been to D.C. a few times. I have my doubts. Is this creeping toward authoritarianism? It is an extension of federal authority using interesting, novel legal theories that we haven't seen before necessarily. And so, to some sense, yes. Some might say, look, he's using the legalized channels to do this stuff, right? There are things like the Home Rule Act and these laws that are in place. Something I often tell my students is that the real scandal is often what's legal, as opposed to whether people are breaking the law. And in this case, the fact that these things are built in law, right? They write a law so that if there's an emergency, there's a clear chain of command. There's a clear sort of set of plans that the executive can trigger legitimately in their minds. but we would expect those things to be used responsibly. And what we're finding out is that there's no sort of parent in there saying, well, you're going to use these tools responsibly, right? It's not, like professors trying to explain AI to their students in some ways, right? We are just trying to say, how are you going to use these tools responsibly? And I can't say I see much interest in using these tools responsibly. What I see is somebody who wants to use these things that are written into law for a specific reason to create a political spectacle, to create a set of stories that he thinks is going to help, I think, bring people who have started to be concerned about him, right, especially over the Epstein stuff, back online, right? Now we can talk about how much we all hate the people in D.C. and use all the coded language that some parts of his base will want to use. Not everybody, but some parts. So that's the point, right? The point, I think, is to move those things. So is this authoritarianism? Well, I view it as, if somebody came here and tried to tell Wisconsin, if the federal government was here trying to tell Wisconsin how to operate its government, that would feel bad, right? We wouldn't like that. We had a Supreme Court race here back a few months ago where a representative of the federal government spent lots of money to try to influence how it went. It didn't go very well. So we have that point. But it is, in some sense, everything he's doing here is legal. And that's the concern that we really have to have, right? If this is a political problem, right? Politicians can constrain this. Congress can constrain this. Congress can tell this to go away if they wanted to show up and vote. But clearly, there's not a lot of interest in doing that.
Well, and you could say you can do this in the case of an emergency, but nobody said what an emergency is.
Right. Well, there are rules in there about how you define emergency and when an emergency delegation can be withdrawn. But again, if you have control of Congress because it's your party and no one wants to contradict you, those, when we talk about guardrails, right? That's one of those guardrails, and not enough of Congress is interested in constraining the president, and so he gets to say what he wants to say. He gets to try to define reality and force other people to adhere to it, and that's really part of what this agenda setting process is what we're seeing. Is he is putting out a definition of reality that is not brought out by the facts. I think, Brian, you were talking about the DC crime rates, right? They're down.
Yeah.
But I say X, and by asserting X, I can then do Y, and then you have judges and other parts of the political system who seem unwilling to want to question those assertions. And so the best, the next group with power in this system are the people, but DC has no representation. So then what do you do?
Had some responsibility, and we
Yes.
did not. And as you said, we didn't come there with stats. We didn't come there, and we knew damn well what the press. I looked them up before I attended this. Over the internet, and what was an attendee, via Zoom or whatever we do it on, I forget, with the White House these days. And so I'm sitting there and I've got my stats in front of me. Why didn't every other reporter? Why didn't you ask that question? Why didn't you push back? Why did you ask him about Putin? Why did you play by his ground rules? Why did he say, okay, we're going to have a few questions and then we'll have some questions about a few other questions about other matters, which he never really answered. And it took like 2 or 3 questions of people bowing, and including Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who said, these are these tough, by the way, MAGA guys who are tough, hombres, right? They're type A personalities. And this guy's whining in the press room about how he was, carjacked or whatever. And I'm going, nobody cares. What are you? You're there to ask a question. You are there to not tell me your life story. I don't know you. I don't care. I'm sorry that you were, I don't know, mugged, robbed, or they said bad words to you, whatever the hell it was that got him so bent out of shape. But at the end of the day, you're there to ask this president a question about this issue or other issues pertinent to the American people. And we're failing to do our job. And that's so the people are ultimately responsible, but how can the people be responsible when the people who are representing the people are not responsible in that briefing room? It was sickening to watch.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, right? That the job of the press is to make sure the people know what's happening in the rooms they can't get into. And I'm not convinced I trust Brian on this. I was not convinced that was happening. That was happening already, and I'm further convinced now, because ultimately, the people who we want journalists to force power to explain itself so we can make judgments about it, right? And we don't want people saying, "Oh, I agree with this," and then giving a long soliloquy explaining to the president why this is such a wise and just move, so the president can say, "Thank you," or whatever, right? That's not what we want, right? That's not doing a job for us.
Yeah, that's not PR. If you're going to do that, fine. Just wave your badge and says PR, and I'm here for Donnie. And fine, you can do that. I won't call on you if I were there. But by God, don't pretend to be a reporter and then basically be the tail end of the human centipede, picking up crap and eating it and going, yum, that's good. That's crap. We shouldn't be doing it.
And that's exactly what happened, because he mentioned this, the reporter you're talking about mentioned this event that happened that he was involved in, and then was pretty effusive with his praise of the president for doing this. And then when he finished, the president seemed a little flummoxed because there was really no question. But then sort of responded. And we know in the past couple of months, the president has called reporters out as having their questions be evil. And this one he said, "Now that's a good question." And
whenever Donald Trump says it's a good question, that means somebody walked up to him, stuck his finger in his butt, pulled it out, licked it, and said, "That's great." It's Donald Trump. Every time he says it's a good question, it's because someone praised Donnie, and that's not a good question. The first question was a horrible question. Well, this is really good. Can you explain to us why this was really good? I wanted to smack the guy. I've seen him in the briefing room a couple of times. I came close to smacking him once. Maybe I will.
Don't do that.
Outside of the briefing room.
And we haven't. We decided to change, to basically toss out the story that we were going to talk about and talk about this one. It was very much last minute, so we don't have a great deal of information on what is it Home Rule Act? I've got it in the notes. Is that what it is called?
So,
Home Rule Act, Section 740. But it did say, from what I read, that it's only supposed to be good for 48 hours, and then Congress has to act. Does any...
Yeah.
Brian, go ahead.
The Home Rule Act was passed in 73, and that was during Nixon, and it granted D.C. residents the right to elect their own government. And so prior to that act, D.C. was governed directly by Congress, never the president, and residents had no say in local leadership. So the idea of involving you can go to the Council of District of Columbia online to look up the Home Rule Act to find out what it is. But this Home Rule Act gives you limited responsibility and limited ability to interfere in D.C. for up to 48 hours before congressional approval, and that's even questionable. D.C. is its own government, and Donald Trump says no, it's not. So we didn't even ask that question in the briefing room. We never brought up the Home Rule Act. We never asked him how long it would take and how long he was going to try to hold on to it or what the next steps were. We just sit there and listen to this man, saying stuff like punks and thugs and hooligans, and what was the one that got me going the most?
Bloodthirsty.
Blood, yeah. The blood. Oh no! Wait a minute. He called the number of car thefts have doubled. Lie. Carjackings tripled. Lie. Drugged out maniacs and homeless people. That's what he described them as. And I'm going, it's bad enough when you're homeless. Now you're a drugged out maniac if you're homeless, and Donald Trump's going to kick you out of the district. Where the hell are you going to go? Where the hell are you going to go? It's not like they're putting... The reason why there's so many homeless in the street is because, 40 years ago, who was that guy that was president? Oh, yeah, Ronald Reagan, who cut all the funding to homeless shelters and to people who are in mental institutions, and that made them homeless. And they have been homeless ever since. And so Donald Trump is going... is he going to wave a magic wand? Is he going to line them all up and shoot them? Is he going to deport them to Alligator Alcatraz? What the hell is Donald going to do to get rid of the homeless? We don't know, and we didn't ask.
Michael, what do you think? What are the next moves, do you think?
Well, I don't know what the next moves are. I assume the next moves will involve legal challenges to the presence of the National Guard based on the Home Rule Act. And so that will give, I think, at least a hook for journalists to be able to tell the story, to continue to tell the story of this being something that the city does not want, right? One of the things I think we can see in sort of a modern ongoing news story is that you get a first mover advantage by announcing a policy, and then over time, resistance or objections come in. So my guess is the district is going to be trying to find its way into court in order to make sure that this is limited, or as Brian, they have 48 hours of federal control. So whenever it formally starts, right, that should start a clock to then make it illegal again. Although again, I don't remember whose line. Don't quote laws to men who have swords. Right? I don't know whose quote that is, but that's fundamentally what I think the next step is in that. So, luckily for us, potentially, is that DC is a city with a lot of journalists per capita. Although they're going to have to do a better job than they did on this morning to get the news out. I think I want to see if we can sort of pivot, go into the theory question, because you asked a question at the beginning, right? Where is the president getting his facts, right? And I think there's been a lot. Right. Well. I think Brian can sort of maybe speak to this, right? One of the ideas here is that the president is an avid television viewer, I'm told. He likes himself some Fox News. He likes himself some cable news generally, right? And I think, is that a fair kind of he has access to the government data, but it's a lot less interesting.
He treats everything like it's a freaking TV show. He brings Janine Pirro out and he goes, I can make this up if I wanted to. He says she was a good DA, so she went into show business.
Right.
What the hell is that? What the hell are you talking about?
And I believe he mentioned that she had the #1 show as well. So
yes.
Yeah. I think there was a story. Yeah, I think there's a story earlier this year that Tulsi Gabbard was trying to redo the presidential daily brief to look like a Fox News show so that they could present him the information in the format he would prefer. I don't think I made that up. I think that was a story.
No, they did. And Pete Hegseth, when he went to the Pentagon, spent government money to put in and build a makeup room so he could look pretty when he comes out. I'm going, what in the hell is wrong with these people? I said, God.
Right. So I think we should nationalize that makeup room. I think anybody in DC should be able to get a powder, just to go about their day. I honestly think we should turn that into a public good. But I guess I want to talk about if we think of the president as a television-driven news consumer, right? There's a theory that we have in mass comm studies called cultivation theory, which a lot of people maybe learn as mean world theory. And the idea of that is that people who watch a lot of television come to believe that what they see on television is the unvarnished truth. Now, to speak to my friends who've worked in local news, especially on television, Mark, is that
and Brian,
Brian, that everything you tend to, what you see on local news tends to be true, right? Like there was a murder in town yesterday, right? And police are investigating it, or there was a crime. But the things that news, especially at the local news level, the way that they sort of decide what story, there's an old phrase, right? If it bleeds, it leads. And so that is a lot. So if you watch your local news, because news selects for the unusual, and violent crime is actually unusual, right? We get a situation where people think the world is more violent than it actually is, because the news that they learn about the world from, learn about the world outside their experience, tells them the world is more violent. It tells them that there's more dangerous stuff. I talk to my students here in Milwaukee, and they've got their families from the suburbs or from rural Wisconsin are scared for them every day. I said, well, it's not like there's no crime in Milwaukee, right? Of course there is. It's a big city. But did you get murdered on the way to class today? No. Did I get murdered like that? So clearly there's it's not, a fully, it's not an absolute pit of violence and despair here, right? But if you only ever watch the news about Milwaukee, you're not going to see a lot of that other stuff. You're going to see what happened on the news today. And we would also say that there are people who have their outlets whose news agenda is about, foregrounding violent crime, foregrounding danger. We have a lot of that. A lot of new outlets do that. And I think that's another concern that we have to talk about. So if our president is not looking at his data, but is looking at his stories on TV, he's getting a vision of the world that is that has been presented from him, that has basis in truth, but does not necessarily speak to the actual state of play in those cities, the state of life in those cities. We've all lived in big cities, right? We all know what's on the news, and we also, know that it's actually not that violent.
Well, DC isn't that violent. I can walk down, I've been there 30 years and I've never once been afraid to be there at night, in the day. It has more, good Lord, do you realize how many police entities are in Washington, D.C.? You've got the Capitol Police, right? And then you've got Washington, D.C. Police. You have the FBI. You have the Park Police. You have, FBI, Homeland Security. I mean, there's at least 6 different entities that are already there, and they are, and the Metro Police. You want to ride the Metro? There's the Metro Police. There is practically no place you can go in Washington, D.C., unless it's Southeast, where you won't see a police officer every 5 or 10 minutes and nobody cares. And they don't care in Southeast, and they're still going to, whatever. All I can tell you, it's complete garbage to say that DC is this violent, it's so violent it's an emergency. He just doesn't want to say 2 words. Jeff Epstein. That's the whole reason why we went through this today. And we got to do better as reporters to hold his feet to the fire. And the question I still want answered that they've never answered, I asked him on the rope line, I asked him in the White House, I asked his in the first Trump administration, and I've asked in the second Trump administration. Did Jeff Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell ever hook you up on a date? I want that answered.
And
it's a lot easier to talk about the vibes you're getting from TV, right? Because your audience is also consuming that same stuff. If your base is watching the same television that you, the politician, are, it's very easy to connect to people. And if you're worried that base is deserting you a little bit because of your issues with the Epstein file, like just strategically, this seems like if we're talking about media strategy and talking about the direction of attention, this absolutely seems like one of the choices you might make if you were in that position. Sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to say, I forgot to mention earlier, Brian, when you were talking about journalists not pushing back and not having the statistics, I did what I mentioned in an earlier episode, which was to switch around between the different news networks. And MSNBC, when President Trump was saying how bad the crime is, they actually had a sidebar showing that the crime statistics, how they had gone down dramatically in the last year.
That's there. Where are the people? And Mark, your point, if they have that available, why wasn't there a reporter in that? And here's the other thing that hacks me up about that. People saying, well, we don't want to be rude to the president, so we won't shout out a question. Bullshit. It was Helen Thomas who told me, Brian, it's not rude to ask a question. It's rude when they won't answer it. So don't be afraid. And then, of course, Sam Donaldson said, I'll teach you how to yell so your voice will be heard. And that's where I got, my football coach's voice from. So that's, it's one thing to have it on TV, calling him in a question, but those people in the room did not live up to what they were supposed to do.
Well, and the president, he did.
Go ahead, Mark.
He did cite his own statistics, as you said. He questioned.
He made them up.
Yeah, and this was
he pulled them out of his butt. I asked him about immigration one time in the Rose Garden, and I said, "Look, I have access to the same information that you have. Where do you say that it's that?" By the way, that's another BS statistic about there are no illegal crossings for the third month. How do you know? If they crossed and got across and you didn't catch them, what? Suddenly that there's none left? Horseshit. This is a bullshit type of stat that he just pulls out of his butt and shouts as gospel. And the same thing for the immigration. When I said, where did you get him? He goes, well, you have access to information, but I've got access to better information. I go, well, where did you get it? Because he's not going down there and counting anybody. He's certainly not going there counting the crimes in D.C. He's relying on the same uniform crime stats that are provided by the Department of Justice and local law enforcement. That's where he gets his numbers, and he's lying about them. Plain and simple.
We end up in the situation where every fentanyl bust is either a sign of really effective, border policing, or just think of all the stuff that's not getting caught, right? They caught this big one. Think of all the ones who are not getting caught, right? It's every number can be explained both ways, right? And I think that's one of the concerns, and that's what I think. Would the power of there's Joseph Stalin, right? Our not a great guy. We can all stipulate, not a great guy. Famously, like one of his lines, right, that I think gets requoted a lot: "One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic," right? The emphasis on personalizing specific victims, that's a choice, right? That's a choice to make a story more engaging, because you're not thinking about, you're not thinking about numbers, right? You're thinking about this one person, usually a telegenic person who was victim of a violent crime, right? And so what do you say to that? Yes, like, I'm talking about one person, it absolutely is a tragedy, right? This one person had a mom, and I can put them on TV, and this person had family, and they had dreams, and they had hopes, and they probably have like really nice social media pictures. Like, it's horrid, right? And when you want to talk about crime stats, right, those numbers, like, there are like 1584 violent crimes in DC through this day, and it was 1700 last year and 2100 the year before, right? That number, like, that's a less compelling number to people, because a number is a number, right? We all have sports backgrounds, right? The difference between a 250 hitter and a 275 hitter is a hit a week, and a 300 hitter is 2 hits a week. And even if you watched all the games, if you're not record keeping, you wouldn't know. Everyone is sort of taking this on vibes, right? They're watching the local news, which does account for the unusual. They are, they're listening to the politicians they trust. They're, feeling how they feel. Like, I can't tell someone not to feel unsafe if they feel unsafe. But I mean, I'm 6'1", 210, right? I don't feel unsafe in a lot of places, but I'm not everybody, right? But how do you deal with those feelings? And the truth is, we can explain these things to people. We can tell them murder rates are down across the country, right? Whether you're a intense DA, a punishment-focused DA, or like the guy in Philadelphia who's famous as a reform DA. Violent crime is down, right? Whatever was up, right? Whatever bumped up around the pandemic has come down. People don't feel that way, and they don't feel that way, partly because of, maybe.
I don't think they pay attention. I think people don't pay attention. They're just going around living their life. Donald Trump comes out, pulls a ribbon out of his ass, and calls it, $1 million, and people go, "Oh, look, $1 million." So to that point, that's why we fail, because the difference between a tragedy and statistics, or the difference between humanizing and dehumanizing the issue, and the statistics can dehumanize it. Donald Trump will use the tragedy to humanize it and then lie to you about the statistics. So it's manipulation that we have to call into question and that we fail to do. And Donald Trump knows that. He listens to people. He knows that they don't care. He knows that what they do care about are the tragedies. So he's going to play up the tragedy. The Doge guy that got, trampled. Look, I've seen worse at a family reunion than what happened to the Doge guy.
I want to go to your next family reunion, Brian. Okay.
Hey, we're Karens. Shit's going to hit the fan, baby.
I want to come after dark, though. Like after everyone.
Safer.
Yeah. There's a law named after a person is usually a law that is meant to really
Megan's Law.
Yeah, Megan's Law. We have one here that the Supreme Court race hasn't even started yet, and one justice, the sitting justice, has already called out her opponent on not supporting something called Marcy's Law. Right? It's just when we personalize these things, it makes it more compelling. And sometimes sometimes that's really important, and sometimes it is a way of distracting from what's actually going on. There's a great story in a San Francisco paper today where you're not allowed to take pictures in an immigration court, and so they sent in an illustrator and said, draw pictures, draw what you're seeing, because you can do that. You're getting all these, and then there's a written story to go along with it, talking about kids in these little kids in these spaces, having to courtrooms with toys in them as their parents get deported, right? It's just this wretched scene. I don't know how the people who are involved in that situation sleep at night, frankly. And it's really when you see the images, when you see the images on the individual basis, that changes the way we think about these things, right? If you were somebody who, when you saw the statistics on illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, you would say, hey, this is a problem, and then you watch the images of ICE raids and they're taking away grandfathers. It works the other way too, right?
Well, one of the things that we, after all of these episodes, I don't think a phrase we brought up is the bully pulpit, I'm sorry. And I think one of the things when Donald Trump gives his statistics and his stories, and as Brian said, maybe a lot of people aren't paying attention, we'll have to watch and see how news media, if they are adding the actual statistics into the stories, so that people will see that and not just listen to what the president said, but get some factual information that can be juxtaposed with what the president said with these individual stories. One last thing, Brian, anything from you?
Well, I will just say this. Reporters have to do better. The president isn't going to. And the people around him, as I watched them today, it looked like a police lineup rather than a presidential administration. Every single one of those people stood and lied to the American people, and every single one, Pam Bondi comes out and goes, crime ends in D.C. now. Horse shit. That's all these overstatements, all this and then Pete Hegseth coming out and saying whatever hell Pete Hegseth said. All I can tell you is that I watched him, I listened to him, I wrote down what he said, and after he got done, I just go, that guy's as dumb as a box of rocks. So it's the whole group of them up there speaking out and just speaking out of their butt to support the President of the United States who doesn't want to talk about Jeff Epstein. Keep his feet to the fire. If you're a working reporter, learn from this and understand what your job is to do and what you shouldn't be doing. And kissing the butt of anybody who's an elected official is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if crime is done in D.C., then a supporter should have a lot of time to ask more Epstein questions, right? There's no more crime coverage anymore, right? It's gonna put the
Who needs it?
It's gonna put the Washington Post local desk out of business. No more crime. What are they gonna report about? They're gonna have to get out of the office.
Meanwhile, every 5 minutes, I'm getting an email blast from some newspaper that I subscribe to, telling me that somebody else has been shot, and I'm going, we're full of it. We're just absolutely, become numb to mass shootings. But when the president stands from the bully pulpit and says, "Look at me, look at me, look at me," and I'll predict this: 10 years from now, you'll find so few people who admit they voted for Trump the second or third time. It's going to be like Nixon. How the hell did the guy get reelected if nobody voted for him? There's just going to be the very few, the old, the wretched, the ugly, and the utterly contemptible.
Brian,
and I just want to add this one more point, just to circle back, because I'm afraid I left that point unfinished previously. Right? Journalists should personalize stories, but they should be very clear about, whether that story reflects the broader reality or not. Right?
Absolutely.
That's the thing to be clear. I'm not saying personalization is a neutral term. It can be used for positive or negative, depending on your perspective, as long as the personalization choice you're making is reflective of the larger reality. That is what journalists should be doing in these sort of stories.
Tuned in makes people care. But if you come out and tell a lie and back it up with what personalized story, you're not doing your job. That's just not your job. Your job is to communicate to people what's actually going on and how do people relate to other people. It's through people. So you're right.
Yeah, one of the things I say in my classes is stories are about people, not things, and those things could be statistics. Now, you have to have those statistics to tell us the complete story, but the way to dig down in that is to tell the story of a person to bring those statistics to life. Brian, do you have your book handy? Is it nearby?
Oh, well, I will be happy to show the book.
Hold up the book.
Wherever fine books are sold. You can find it wherever fine books are sold.
And Mike, I think it would be a great addition to a journalism class to have some readings from that book as part of the curriculum.
I will give it a look. I'll ask my library to get it.
There you
Check
go.
it out.
There you go. All right, guys. Thanks, Brian and Mike. I hope our audience today found our discussion, as always, to be helpful when it comes to trying to figure out why this story matters and understanding it. We would appreciate, as always, if you hit the like and subscribe and join us again soon for another edition of Hard Pass. Hopefully not one that we have to come up with at the very last minute. And now, Fiona, are you there? Have you left us for another podcast?
No, Mark, I'm here. I would never leave you guys. And to our listeners, we hope you won't leave either. If you don't mind, hit the like and subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.